All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, all you magnificent melonheads of the world. I hope you guys had an excellent extended weekend and Thanksgiving holiday. Today is Monday, December 2nd, 2024. Oh my God, it's December already. Where did 2024 go? Into oblivion. The same place all the corporate executives are going this morning. Have you guys seen these headlines this morning? I don't know what's going on, but I was on my phone call with Mish. We were doing our morning briefing that we do before the show every morning. And wow, we've got in the last 48 hours or so, Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares, he's out of here. And the interesting thing about Carlos Tavares leaving as the CEO of Stellantis is that they have no replacement. They're saying there's a disagreement with the board of directors, and the board of directors over at Stellantis, they think it would be better to not have a CEO than to have Carlos Tavares for the next couple of months. That's how bad this guy has done over at Stellantis. And look, guys, we've talked about this company over and over again for like the last 6 months, really. It seems like at least once a week, there was some nasty Stellantis headline about layoffs, about a plant closing, about a model that wasn't selling or something going wrong. Wrong way bets on electric vehicles being chief among them, but Stellantis has had no shortage of problems. So that CEO, he is out of here. Now, a couple of things that you might want to worry about over at Stellantis. It's hard to say exactly what was the driver. But guys, this morning happened. Now, it was just 2 days ago that we saw that the CFO over at Nissan abruptly resigned. Stephen Ma, he's out of there. Now, fun fact about Nissan, because Nissan, their COO, quit just a couple of months ago, again, very abruptly with no replacement named. And that leaves their current CEO as the only C-suite executive for the whole freaking company. It's a one-man show over at Nissan. And the one guy who's running the company is the replacement CEO because the prior CEO had to flee Japan in a box because he was arrested and being charged. You remember that whole thing about the CEO being smuggled out of the country by special operators? WTF is going on at Nissan. Now, this story breaks as late last week we were talking about there was rumor that unnamed Nissan executives were saying that the company was on life support, that they had just a few months to live. So that's two auto companies with the abrupt departure of C-suite level executives without any replacements named. Guys, there is big trouble happening in the auto industry. Cheap Chinese electric vehicles seems to be the common denominator with these two stories. Both companies make big bets on electric vehicles. Both companies lost a ton of money on electric vehicles because the Chinese are making them for cheaper. The BYD, those electric vehicles are just eating their lunch over there, despite protectionist tariffs that have been put in place to try to protect them. On top of that, people just don't really want electric vehicles. Some people do. Some people love them. But it generally seems like hybrids are still the preferred model, depending on who you ask. But most of what I've seen, the hybrids are still selling very well. And while these companies that went all electric, they're missing out on those hybrid sales. And so now their executives are out of here. And just moments ago, I mean, literally minutes ago, Mish and I were still on the phone talking about the Nissan and the Stellantis executives quit. We found out that Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger, Pat G, he's out of here. Now, this is interesting because, again, no replacement has been named. They're naming two interim co-CEOs. And I have a rule here. When I see co-CEO, danger, run, do not walk for the exits, all right? I don't dabble in co-CEOs. Sorry. I have seen way too many companies have way too many big problems, and all of those companies at some point had co-CEOs where nobody was really sure who was running the ship. Bad things happen there. So now look, Intel, they've been having lots of problems. They missed the boat on AI. All the other chip makers have done very well on artificial intelligence. Intel has not. Now, Intel just recently announced that they had received billions of dollars in government grants under the CHIPS Act. Although those grants were a little bit less than the company was hoping, they also turned down $11 billion in loans. And now the CEO is out of there again with no replacement name. So we're seeing the abrupt departure of C-suite executives at companies with longstanding problems here. Insiders jumping ship, another sign of the times. Rapid CEO turnover, another sign that things are about to change in markets. And also keep an eye on that Japanese yen. That's something to watch out. We were watching this over the weekend. The Japanese yen strengthened very, I don't want to say violently. It wasn't quite to the level of the August 5th turmoil. Remember Godzilla knocking over Japan, the yen carry trade, that whole mayhem, and stocks you weren't allowed to sell on the morning of August 5th because suddenly all the stocks went down from all those brokerages went down for maintenance at the same time. Nothing to see here. Gary Gensler did nothing about it, which he excels at doing. It wasn't that bad, but the strengthening of the yen over the weekend, it was at the same pace. It just hasn't gone on as long as we saw in August. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to look at the chart. It's something to watch. It's possible the yen carry trade is starting to unwind again. And this is just as the Federal Reserve is talking about pausing their interest rate cuts, and right as the Bank of Japan is talking about resuming their interest rate hikes. So we got the central banks moving in different directions, possibly some yen carry trade talk coming back in the near future. Donald Trump was making news. The president-elect was on Truth Social threatening 100% tariffs on BRICS countries if they try to replace the dollar as the world reserve currency. Now, look, my initial reaction to this story was very dismissive. Oh, this is just Trump doing his typical, Twitter diplomacy thing. It's definitely not going to happen. It's a negotiating tactic. But at some point, guys, this guy is the president-elect. He's going to be the leader of the free world. And he's threatening 100% tariffs on countries that represent something like combined, 50% of global GDP, if you add up all of the BRICS economies at this point. That's a big deal. And now he's not doing it yet. He doesn't have the policy power to do it. It's debatable whether he could do that without an act of Congress. But you got to pay attention to that, guys. If these tariffs really become as common and as big as he's threatening, get ready for inflation. Because again, the common misunderstanding is that tariffs is a tax on other countries. That is not correct. Tariffs is a tax on you, the consumer. You pay the tariffs. The importers pay the tariffs, and they pass that on to the customer. Tariffs are not paid by the countries that export the stuff here. That is very important here. It does ultimately hurt their sales because their products become less competitive. So over time, it hurts those countries, and it may lead to things like nearshoring, friendshoring, reshoring, all those shorings. But that stuff doesn't happen instantly. In the short term, in the immediate aftermath, you end up with inflation. Inflation is coming back if these tariffs go as widespread as they're saying. What else? We got more export restrictions on Chinese AI this morning. They're putting 140 companies are on the export restrictions list. High bandwidth memory chips are being banned to sell to China, along with some semiconductor manufacturing equipment. And guys, I don't know if you've been paying attention to my Twitter feed or the Twitter feed of the OrcaFin over the last couple of days. And this new guy, the name escapes me at the minute, but this guy has done fantastic research on all of the NVIDIA chips that are for sale in the secondary market in China right now. The export restrictions on AI equipment into China are a freaking joke. I may have more to say about that in the near future, but there are warehouses full of GPUs and Supermicro servers that are for sale on eBay and Wish.com and Alibaba and all these other things. So if they were really so hard to get these chips into the country, they wouldn't be for sale on eBay, shipping from China. Uber cheap. We'll get you a great deal. Don't worry. Also going on, we got a sovereign debt crisis is brewing in France right now. Pay attention to this one. This stuck up on me over the weekend as well. Marine Le Pen's party, they came out of the last election with a lot more power. They're threatening a no confidence vote this week that would basically collapse the government, which could result in mayhem in France, economically speaking. I mean, I don't know enough about the way the French government does business to be able to say, what the laws go which way. But I do know this. Over the weekend, very briefly, French government debt, the interest rate, the borrowing cost for the French government was higher than it was for Greece. So let that sink in for a minute. Greece, the country that is the personification of a sovereign debt crisis. Remember the riots in 2015 and the Greek debt crisis? Remember the pigs countries, Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain, how they were all having all the big debt crisis? French debt was worse than that very briefly over the weekend. That's how worried people are about this spending crisis in France. And we've had something similar. The German government collapsed recently over arguments over spending. So what is going on? Well, France and Germany for years did not meet their requirements under the NATO charter. They spent all their money on these pet climate projects and all their money on all these other things that they wanted to do. And they were spending something like 1%, even less than 1% of GDP on defense. And now, oops, they're banging on the war drums. Everybody wants to go to war with Russia and send more missiles and tanks to Ukraine and all this other stuff. And the French and Germans are like, oh, crap, a lot of our stuff doesn't work. We didn't maintain it. We need to start spending on our military again. Donald Trump is threatening to pull out of NATO if he doesn't get his way, along with his 100% tariffs. We better build our own militaries now. Oh, that's right. That's very expensive. How are we going to pay for it? That's the rub there. And all of a sudden, you've got sovereign debt crisis brewing in in France and Germany. You could say because of Russia, but also mostly because of France and Germany. So pay attention to that. That could happen as soon as this week. And to end the monologue on a happy note, it was a great weekend at the box office. A record-setting Black Friday, thanks in no small part to Moana 2, Wicked, and Gladiator 2. What are three movies Jack won't be seeing? But they did very well in theaters. So, hey, AMC, we haven't talked about that one for a while. Are the AMC guys still around? Is that still a thing? Oh, man, that company, watching what happened to that stock, that was brutal. We got a lot to talk about this morning, guys. Why don't we shrink my big melon of a head and let's see what's going on in the markets today. Don't forget that like button for the YouTube algorithm. And if you're new here, hit the subscribe button right next to it so we can have our coffee together every morning as we go through markets. And right now, the S&P 500 is just modestly higher by 2 points, 0.04% higher for the S&P 500. The Dow is down by 38 points or 0.09% lower this morning. And the NASDAQ is positive by about 47 points or just under 0.25% to the upside. We got 2 out of 3 indexes are in the green this morning, hence the bull on the thumbnail. The DXY is higher again, 55 basis points to be exact, 106.29 for the US dollar. That's up by about 0.5%. Pay attention to this one, guys. We talked about this in the monologue. This is USD JPY, the number of yen it takes to make $1. We're looking at daily candles here, and I just want to show you what happened since Wednesday, since we last spoke. Look at what the yen did over the last couple of days here. We had a very rapid strengthening of the yen over the weekend here. Now, again, the total size of the move wasn't that big. It was a substantial move. Remember, this is the third or fourth largest currency in the world. It went from about 154.5 yen to the dollar down to at one point under 150. It's actually under 150 right now, 149.9 yen to the dollar. And that happened over a span of about 4 or 5 days. Now, it's not as big as the move that we had in July and August. That's what led to that panic in the yen carry trade. But you guys will notice the intensity or the rate of this chart dropping is pretty much the same as it was back in August. And that's why some people are starting to say, hey, that whole yen carry trade thing, I know they were very dismissive of that in the financial press. Oh, don't worry. Some quant over at JP Morgan says it's 50% done, then magically 70% done. Don't worry about it. It's water under the bridge. I'm not so sure that's the case. Keep an eye on this yen chart. It's not moving so much this morning, but it did move big over the weekend. Also going on this morning in the Treasury bond market, we've got the 30-year yield is at 4.402. That's up about 3 basis points. The 10-year, 4.222, that is up 3 basis points. The 2-year, 4.225, that's up 5 points here in the middle. And the 1-month, 4.619, that's down by a fraction of a point. Not a lot of movement going on in bonds. And the 10-year and the 2-year remain virtually equal here. So keep an eye on that inversion of the yield curve. Looking over at the commodities board, we've got spot gold is down by about $5 this morning, $2,648 for spot gold. That's down about 0.18%. Spot silver is pretty much unchanged here, $30.60. That's up a fraction of a penny here. Essentially nothing, no movement on silver. Copper is lower by a fraction of 1%. Platinum is down by about 0.5%. Palladium is up by about 0.5%. And WTI crude oil for January at 68.88. That's up 88 cents. A lot of eights there. 1.125% higher for WTI crude this morning. Still in the high 60s. And looking at Bitcoin, I was watching Bitcoin all through the weekend. It was not one of those Thanksgivings where everybody's weird uncle talks about all the money he's making in Bitcoin, and so everybody goes home and buys Bitcoin on Black Friday. We didn't have that big rush to Bitcoin that we saw. Like, remember Thanksgiving 2017? We had a lot of that going on. Bitcoin did look like it was trying to rally over the holiday weekend. We did make something of a little bit of a double top, 2 attempts to break higher than 98,000. Those failed, and now we are lower this morning, about 95,600. That's down about $1,600 from yesterday. But it is worth pointing out that we got this one. Mr. Saylor was buying Bitcoin again over the weekend. MicroStrategy bought an additional 15,400 Bitcoin for $1.5 billion over these last 4 days. So Saylor and his infinite money glitch, they continue to buy up the Bitcoin. All right, let's talk about some of these executive departures that are all happening rapid succession, one after another. Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares resigns amid problems in the U.S. and falling sales. Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares has unexpectedly resigned from the automaker amid increasingly different views between the executive and the board of directors, the company said on Sunday. The world's 4th largest car maker said its board accepted Tavares' resignation on Sunday. His departure is effective immediately. Jeep maker Stellantis said its process to appoint a new CEO is well underway and that it expects to conclude the search during the first half of next year. Until then, the company said it will establish a new interim executive committee led by John Elkann. Look, guys, they're basically saying here, and this quote says it pretty well here, this Bernstein analyst, the market will inevitably ask why the Stellantis board considered that not having a permanent CEO for some months was preferable to keeping the current CEO in situ. Who says in situ, really? Well, Bernstein analyst Daniel Rosca does. That's what he said in an analyst note on Sunday night. We struggle to identify any scenario under which these events can be positively spun as far as the stock price is concerned. I mean, when the company says we'd rather have no CEO than this guy Carlos here, it's not exactly a ringing endorsement of his tenure. Right now, Stellantis stock is down about 7.25% here. It's down trading at $12.24, off by almost a buck. Big decline for Stellantis this morning. Now, another automaker having other problems. Nissan shares rise, moving in the other direction as the CFO steps down during a challenging period. Nissan shares rose following the chief financial officer, Stephen Ma, is set to step down from his position, the latest executive to exit the car maker during a challenging time. The stock gained as much as 1% in early morning trading, though the shares are still down almost 35% this year. It's not clear whether Ma may be demoted or leave the company, according to a person familiar with the situation who asked not to be identified because nobody names their sources anymore. The change, which comes 17 months after Ashwani Gupta left as COO, follows an announcement last month that it will eliminate 9,000 jobs and cut a fifth of its manufacturing capacity. We were just talking about Nissan a few weeks ago about those big job cuts. Guys, there's big problems in the auto industry. Cars just got so expensive, nobody can afford them. And that happens at the same time that Chinese automakers start flooding the market with cheap EVs. Not good for the establishment. As a result, CEO Makoto Uchida will be left as the sole top-level C-suite executive at a time when Nissan has drawn the attention of one of the most influential activist investors in Japan, Efficimo Capital Management. Although years have passed since the dramatic arrest and ouster of former chairman Carlos Ghosn, the car maker remains mired in management upheaval. So bad things at Nissan. That stock, though, up about a fraction of a percent here. That was actually up a little bit overnight. 360, I believe this is priced in yen. That is 360.4 yen for Nissan. So Stellantis not reacting well to the CEO leaving. Nissan seems to like the news of the CFO leaving. Now, let's talk about this one here. Just hit the tape moments ago. Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger is out, but the stock is up 5%. So the market is not saying, see ya, Pat, don't let the door hit you where the Lord split you. Intel announced on Monday that CEO Pat Gelsinger has retired from the company effective December 1st, effective immediately. Intel named 2 interim co-chief CEOs while the board of directors searches for a new CEO, David Zinsner, Intel's current CFO and executive vice president, and Michelle Johnston Halthos, current CEO of Intel Products. Guys, co-CEOs, and it's just a thing of mine. I've never seen anything good come from a company with co-CEOs. Danger, danger, run, do not walk. I realize the stock is up right now, but there's something about having two people in charge, and we're all going to share, and it's going to be great. We're not talking about a hipster commune where there's bongo drums and hacky sacks out front. We're talking about freaking Intel here. They're a manufacturing company. Nope, you need a clear chain of command here. Shares of Intel were up 5% Monday in pre-market trading. Gelsinger took over the struggling chip maker in 2021, but the company has only further deteriorated. Intel has been mirrored. There's another use of the word mirror. They've been mirrored in an extended slump due to market share losses in its core business and an inability to crack the artificial intelligence market. The company's stock has fallen 52% year to date. But look at the move today. Right now, the company up 3.6%. It was up as high as 5% earlier. The market likes Gelsinger being out of here. 24.98. It's up almost $1 here. So 2 out of the 3 companies where these executives are abruptly resigning, the stocks are higher on that news. Stellantis being the one exception. Stellantis is taking it on the chin this morning. All right. Now we're going to talk very briefly about this one, guys. Trump threatens 100% tariff on the BRICS bloc of nations if they act to undermine the U.S. dollar. We don't know. We don't need to get too deep in the weeds on this one, guys. We pretty much talked about tariffs in the opening here. Ultimately, guys, this is a tax on the consumer. Yes, it hurts manufacturers overseas, and eventually it could lead to more factories and more jobs here in the States, but those jobs are going to take years to materialize. The higher prices would get here instantly. This will be very, very inflationary if this happens. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, Trump, in a Truth Social post over the weekend, said, "We require a commitment from these countries that they will neither create a new BRICS currency nor back any other currency to replace the mighty U.S. dollar, or they will face 100% tariffs and should expect to say goodbye to selling into the wonderful U.S. economy." Now, I would agree that these countries need our shelves more than we need their crap as far as the manufactured goods goes. That's not to say it would be painless for the American consumer. And let's not forget, guys, when we talk about BRICS, instantly you're thinking Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. But let's also remember Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, United Arab Emirates, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Malaysia. All right. There's a lot of countries have joined BRICS, and a lot of other countries are talking about joining BRICS. Are we going to put 100% tariffs on everybody? What is that going to do to the cost of imports? So this is worth keeping an eye on. Again, is this just typical Trump Twitter diplomacy, or should I say Truth Social diplomacy? Or is there meat behind this threat? Remember, guys, he put Scott Bessent in charge at Treasury. Scott Bessent was the architect of George Soros's takedown of the British pound and the Japanese yen in the 90s. Scott Bessent knows how to fight a currency war. So maybe he's serious about this. Maybe between his Treasury pick and these threats of the tariffs, maybe this really happens. And if that happens, all I'm saying, guys, is you better own some of the shiny, because inflation will be ripping higher if he gets his way when it comes to the tariffs. Last but not least, well, not last, let's talk about this one, though, certainly not least. Latest U.S. strike on China's chips hits the semiconductor tool makers. That's according to this report. And Reuters this morning, more export controls. So again, maybe there's more teeth to these tariff rumors. I mean, this is Biden doing this here, but it is further restrictions on trade. The U.S. will launch its third crackdown in 3 years on China's semiconductor industry on Monday, restricting exports to 140 companies, including chip equipment maker Naura Technology Group, among others, according to 2 people familiar with the matter. The effort to hobble Beijing's chip-making ambitions will also hit Chinese tool makers Piotech and Sci-Carrier Technology, with new export restrictions as part of the package, which also takes aim at shipments of advanced memory chips and more chip-making tools to China. The move marks one of the Biden administration's last large-scale efforts to stymie Trump's ability to access and produce chips that can help with artificial intelligence for U.S. military applications or otherwise threaten U.S. national security. The package includes curbs on China-bound shipments of high-bandwidth memory, or HBM chips, which are critical for high-end applications like AI training. It also includes new curbs on 24 additional chip-making tools and 3 software tools, a new export restrictions on chip-making equipment manufactured in countries like Singapore and Malaysia. And the tool controls will likely hurt Lam Research, KLA, and Applied Materials, as well as non-U.S. companies like Dutch equipment maker ASM International. So more curbs on China. And again, guys, the first few rounds of these export controls and these sanctions that we've put on China to try to keep AI chips, I may have more to say about this in the days ahead, but let's just say they're not working. The chips are still getting into China. They're getting into China at such a ridiculous rate that China is sending them back to us on their second-rate electronics resale websites. So how effective could these controls really be? Now let's talk about France. France won't be blackmailed on budget. Their finance minister says, pay attention to what's going on here, guys. This could be a new European sovereign debt market crisis in the making. This could drive up borrowing costs around the world here. It could affect the Dixie. It could affect dollars. It could affect stocks here in the States. Finance Minister Antoine Armand said France won't accept artificial budget deadlines from Marine Le Pen, even as the far-right leader gave her strongest indication yet that she's prepared to topple the government as soon as this week. Le Pen's national rally has threatened to support a no-confidence motion unless Prime Minister Michael Barnier, sorry, guys, I don't speak much French here, unless Prime Minister Michael tweaks his 2024 budget to index pensions to inflation, among other asks. The far-right leader told Barnier he needs to make the changes by Monday, which is when opposition lawmakers are expected to initiate the process to call a vote of no confidence. The French government doesn't take ultimatums, Armand said. History might beg to differ on that one, I'm just saying. He said that in an interview with Bloomberg Television. We won't be blackmailed. Bond investors have punished France's sovereign debt relative to its peers amid the political brinksmanship in Paris, pushing borrowing costs at one point last week as high as Greece's, and leading Barnier to warn of a storm in financial markets. The political difficulties and market jitters began in June when President Emmanuel Macron called snap elections in a bid to bring clarity to a national assembly where his party was already short of an outright majority. Guys, we've seen almost this exact story play out in Germany. This is not by accident. They're having spending problems. They want to spend all their money on their COP 29, 28, 27 initiatives. They want to spend all this money on all their pet projects, on electrification, on windmills and solar panels and big social safety nets. And then, whoops, there's war breaking out in World War III. I guess we better finally pay attention to our defense spending. You know, the United States isn't going to be there to defend us like we kind of hoped they would for years. And now all of a sudden they're like, well, crap, we don't have enough money for all this. Well, either print it and raise taxes. But guys, we just had this inflation problem. Oh, we need to, I don't know, live in a real world where we can't have our cake and eat it too. And if we just act like money grows on trees, it causes other problems. And well, shit, now we can't afford everything. We have to make hard choices. And when you have governments that are run by idiot children, hard choices don't get made. And you end up with stuff like this. This will play out all across Europe in the coming years. So pay attention to this one. And the fact that French debt was trading at higher interest rates than Greece, wow, that was a wake-up call over the weekend when that one happened. Now, Greece obviously has stepped back from the brink of their sovereign debt crisis, largely because Germany and I don't know if it's the European Central Bank or the IMF, whoever, they basically bailed them out. But it does show you how far France has fallen here. And, oh, by the way, the United States, we're going to have our own little budget crisis coming up pretty soon. It's going to play out over months. But December 20th, the debt ceiling comes back. That's when the debt ceiling gets put in place again. And now we can't issue any net new bonds after that. Now, there's still $700 billion in the Treasury General account. So it's probably going to be 3 to 6 months before the government runs out of money. But we'll be back to this silly exercise in democracy again early next year here in the States. Don't worry. This is not just a French problem. And last but not least, guys, we won't spend too much time on this, but it was a good weekend at the box office. I think maybe the weather played a role in that. It was nasty cold here in the Northeast. But Moana 2, Wicked, and Gladiator 2 deliver Black Friday $109 million record. Ticketing sites were backlogged, according to the box office update. It was a very good weekend for movie theaters. So congratulations to anybody still holding AMC stock out there. A little bit of good news is not so bad on a Monday morning. And I just want to say thank you very much to Charles G. Thank you for the super chat, Charles. He says, yo, I hope you all had a great weekend. Also, Biden pardoned his own son. He sure did. I'm fine with some inflation if it means bringing jobs back. Look, guys, I don't think the Hunter Biden pardon was that big a deal. Here's the thing. I think Trump was going to pardon Hunter Biden anyway because Trump knows they're probably going to prosecute his kids eventually I mean, look, they tried to kill him twice. They impeached him twice, and they lobbed 39 felonies after him. They're going to go after his kids, too. So I think Trump was probably going to pardon Hunter anyway. And so Biden probably is just like, well, they're going to pardon him anyway. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Bill pardoned Roger Clinton. We've seen this kind of stuff before. At the end of a presidency, you always get this like deluge of pardons. Yes, it's more newsworthy. Yes, Hunter Biden is a degenerate and a POS, and honestly, and yes, different rules for different class, and the political elites get away with murder while the plebs get thrown in jail for lesser crimes for serious time. Yeah, it happens. But that happened over the weekend too. Not really financial related, hence why I didn't cover it. But thank you so much, Charles. Appreciate the super chat, sir, and the support of the channel. And thank you to Austin Feinberg, who says U.S. needs to create an incentive program that is tied to tariffs. Example, if a foreign brand wants to sell their product in the U.S., they must commit to produce 50% of products in the U.S. that is sold here by 2030 to avoid a tariff. Again, guys, the tariffs are not paid by the exporters. The tariffs are paid by the importers. So they can, Austin, they can push a thing like a program like that. But ultimately, the exporter doesn't care because he doesn't have to pay it. It's the stores that want to sell his stuff that have to pay it. So the tariff is the incentive for the store to sell stuff that's made in America. The problem is if that stuff isn't made in America, then they're just going to eat the tariff, pass that cost on to the consumer, and sell the stuff anyway. The net result is ultimately you, the consumer, end up paying the price of the tariff. Eventually, it leads to reshoring, and it leads to more factories here in the States. And I hope that manufacturing does come back to the States, but it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be expensive. Any way you look at it, tariffs will be inflationary. I appreciate the super chat, sir, and the support of the channel. Thank you so much, Austin. And look, I hope this tariff thing blows over, guys. I really do. Tariffs, at the end of the day, are not good for economies. They're not. I understand the reasoning behind the tariff, and I don't think we have a level playing field of fair trade. I really don't. That being said, tariffs are destructive, and it will hit the poor and the middle class in the United States harder than anybody else. And thank you so much to Krusty White Bread. Repeal the income tax. Yes. Tariff away. No, I'm not really a big fan of tariffs. And get to work. Yes. 2 out of 3 ain't bad, Krusty White Bread. I'll give you that. Again, I understand the need for the tariffs. I get it. And I think other countries have taken advantage of us. That being said, I'm a free trade guy. I don't like the concept of tariffs at all. Repealing the income tax. Oh, yeah. If you want to get rid of the income tax, put a national sales tax in place. You can't hide from a sales tax. So tax consumption instead of production, and just see how things change. But the rich won't like that because the rich can't hide from the income tax, and all their money is worthless if they can't spend it. But I agree with most of that, Krusty White Bread. Thank you guys for the super chats and the support of the channel. Appreciate that very much. And thank you as well to all my Patreon supporters on YouTube, my magnanimous melonheads, and you guys on Patreon as well. You guys are awesome. Appreciate that. Links down below to all that good stuff, should you feel so inclined. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Love you guys. Everybody, till next time, live small and dream big.